I watched my 10-year-old daughter's face break as my boss told her, right there in front of the entire office, that I was worthless, that I'd failed as a father, that I couldn't even afford to pick her up on time because I was too mediocre to matter. But what Derek Hartwell didn't know, what he could never have imagined, was that I'd spent the last 15 years as a Navy SEAL, trained to stay calm when everything's falling apart. That calm was about to be his biggest mistake. Hit like, subscribe for more betrayal stories, and comment your city or country below. Let me rewind to that Tuesday afternoon. The moment everything changed. I was standing in Derek's office. Sunlight was coming through the floor-to-ceiling windows on the 42nd floor, and I remember thinking how expensive everything looked. The leather chairs, the mahogany desk, the view of the entire city. Derek had always loved reminding people that he'd made it, that he was important. My daughter Sophia was sitting in the corner on a small gray chair, waiting for me. She was supposed to be in school, but my ex-wife Rachel had called that morning asking if I could pick her up early. Some emergency at work. Typical Rachel. Always something urgent, always needing me to adjust. I brought Sophia to the office because childcare had fallen through, and I didn't have a choice. She was a good kid, quiet. She had her tablet with her, drawing pictures of horses and clouds the way 10-year-olds do. Derek stood up from behind his desk. He was still in his tailored suit, still wearing that Rolex that cost more than my car. He looked at Sophia first, then back at me. I saw the shift in his expression, the exact moment something dark crossed his face. "You know what, Marcus?" His voice was loud, deliberately loud. I could hear the people in the hallway pause. "I've been reviewing your performance this quarter, and honestly, it's pathetic. Not just bad, pathetic. You've got no drive, no vision, no spine. You're just dead weight. Middle-aged, mediocre, going nowhere. And your salary? I still can't believe HR approved it." My chest tightened. My hands went cold. Then he turned to Sophia. "That's why your dad can't even pick you up on time from school, sweetie," Derek said, his voice dripping with fake concern. "He's not important enough at his job. That's what happens when you're not good at anything. You end up like your dad." The office went silent. Not just quiet, silent. The kind of silence that happens when everyone's holding their breath because they know something terrible just happened. I looked at my daughter. Her eyes were getting wet. She was trying not to cry, trying to be brave, but she was 8 years old. No, she was 10. I'm sorry, she was 10, and she'd just watched a powerful man tell her that her father was worthless. I didn't yell. I didn't throw his coffee cup through the window. I didn't do any of the things my old training wanted me to do. Instead, I walked over to Sophia, took her small hand in mine, and we walked out of that office. Past the stairs, past the whispers, down the elevator, out of the building. In the car, she asked me, "Dad, is Mr. Derek right? Are you not good enough?" I told her, "No, baby. He's just a scared man who needs to make other people feel small so he can feel big. That's his weakness, not yours. And it's not mine either." But I was lying, and I think she knew it. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the scene. Derek's smile. Sophia's confused, hurt face. The silence of 30 people who did nothing. The powerlessness of it all. I lay in bed next to my wife Rachel, and that's when I started noticing things I'd been too blind to see. Her phone was always in her hand. She'd smile at the screen and turn it away from me. She started wearing perfume on random days she stayed home. Her voice changed when she got unknown calls. She said she was going to the gym, but she'd come home without breaking a sweat. She'd say she was meeting a friend, but her wedding ring would be off when she got back. I wasn't stupid. I was just refusing to see. 3 days after Derek humiliated me in front of my daughter, Rachel left her phone on the kitchen counter while she was in the shower. One message was open, just one line visible on the screen. "Can't wait to see you tonight. He'll be working late. Miss you." The number wasn't saved in her contacts. But I knew. Deep in my bones, I knew exactly who it was. My boss. The man who just told my daughter I was worthless had been sleeping with my wife for God knows how long. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on the couch with my phone in my hand, staring at that one text message. Can't wait to see you tonight. He'll be working late. Miss you. My hands were shaking. Not from anger, not yet. From something worse. From the realization that I'd been living a lie, and I was the only one who didn't know it. Rachel came out of the shower wrapped in her pink towel, humming to herself. Humming. Like she was happy. She didn't see me sitting there in the dark. She walked past me and went into the bedroom, and I heard her opening drawers, moving around. I heard the blow dryer start up. I didn't confront her. Not yet. That would have been stupid. My SEAL training kicked in. Observe, assess, plan. Don't react. Don't let them see you know. The next morning, I did something I'd never done before. I asked Rachel where she was going. She said the gym. I followed her in my truck, staying 3 cars back. She didn't go to the gym. She went to the Riverside Hotel on 5th Avenue, the expensive one with the glass lobby and the high-end restaurants. She walked in like she owned the place, wearing sunglasses and a dress she'd bought last week that I'd seen the credit card charge for. I sat in the parking lot for 2 hours. Then Derek pulled in. My boss. The man who'd humiliated me in front of my daughter 2 days ago. He went into the same hotel, and I knew exactly where he was going. I didn't go inside. I just sat there in my truck, both hands on the steering wheel, and I let it sink in. My wife. My boss. How long? Weeks? Months? How many times had Rachel told me she was at the gym while she was actually in a hotel room with Derek? How many times had she kissed me goodnight after kissing him? And Sophia. Had she ever seen them together? Had my daughter ever figured it out? I drove home slowly. Carefully. I didn't rush. I didn't lose control. I just drove and thought about what I knew and what I didn't know. I thought about the fact that Derek had chosen to humiliate me in front of my child precisely because he knew he had that power over me. He wasn't just sleeping with my wife. He was enjoying the fact that I didn't know. That I was weak and blind and clueless while he was living out some fantasy of power and superiority. That made it worse somehow. It wasn't just betrayal. It was cruelty. When I got home, Rachel was already back from the gym, showered again, wearing different clothes. She was making lunch for Sophia in the kitchen. She looked at me like nothing had happened. Like she hadn't spent the last 2 hours in a hotel room with my boss. Hey, babe, she said, smiling. Sophia's got soccer practice at 4. Can you pick her up at 6? I said yes. I said it normally. Like I didn't know. Like my world hadn't just collapsed into pieces. That night, I picked up Sophia from soccer. She was tired, her hair wet from the shower they have at the facility. She told me about her practice, about how she'd scored a goal, about her friend Mia, who was being mean to her. Normal stuff. Kid stuff. I listened and I drove, and I kept my hands steady on the wheel. Then she said something that broke me. Dad, why was Mr. Derek being so mean to you at your office? I froze. What do you mean, honey? When you took me to work. He was really mean. He said bad things about you. And he was mean to me too. My grip tightened on the steering wheel. What did he say to you? He said it was your fault I had to sit in his office. That you weren't important enough to pick me up on time. He said you weren't good at your job. I pulled over. I had to pull over because I couldn't see the road anymore. There was something in my chest that felt like it was going to explode, and I had to sit down and breathe and remember that I was trained for this. I was trained to stay calm. I was trained to think clearly when everything's falling apart. Sophia, listen to me, I said, turning to face her. Mr. Derek was wrong, and I'm going to make sure he never says anything like that to you again. Do you understand me? Never again. She nodded, and I pulled her close, and I held her while she cried a little, and I made myself a promise right there in that car. Derek Hartwell had no idea who he was messing with, and by the time I was done, he was going to wish he'd never heard my name. The soccer fields were empty now. Just me and Sophia sitting in my truck in the parking lot, the sun starting to dip below the horizon. She'd stopped crying a few minutes ago, but she was still holding my hand tight enough that I could feel her pulse against my palm. I needed to ask her something, but I had to be careful. I couldn't put adult problems on a 10-year-old's shoulders. I was already doing that by letting her see Derek humiliate me. I wasn't going to make it worse by asking her to be my informant. But I needed to know. I needed to understand the scope of what Rachel and Derek had been doing. Sophia, I have a question for you, and I need you to answer me honestly, okay? You're not going to get in trouble. I just need to know the truth. She looked up at me, her eyes still red from crying. Okay, Dad. Have you ever seen Mr. Derek and Mom together? Not at work or at school events. I mean, have you ever seen them together when it was just the two of them? She was quiet for a long moment. Too quiet. I could see her thinking, deciding whether to tell me something she'd been holding on to. One time, she said finally, Mom said I could go to the mall with my friend Leah and Leah's mom. We were supposed to meet at the shopping center at 3 o'clock. But when we got there early, we went to get smoothies at the juice place first. And I saw Mom and Mr. Derek in the lobby of the hotel next to the mall. My entire body went cold. They were holding hands, Dad. And Mr. Derek was kissing Mom's neck. And Mom was laughing. And then they went into the elevator together. I couldn't speak. I couldn't move. I just sat there holding my daughter's hand while she told me that she'd watched her mother walk into a hotel with my boss. A 10-year-old child had figured out the betrayal while her father was still blind. When was this? I asked, my voice steady, even though nothing inside me was steady. 3 weeks ago, the day you worked late for that project. Mom said I could go to the mall with Leah, but then when we saw them, I didn't want to follow Mom and Mr. Derek. It made me feel weird and sad. 3 weeks. They'd been at it for at least 3 weeks that Sophia knew about. How much longer before that? Sophia, why didn't you tell me? She looked down at her hands. I didn't want you to be sad, and I didn't really understand what I was seeing. I just knew it was wrong. It felt wrong. I pulled her close again, and I held her, and I promised myself that this was the last time my daughter would have to carry an adult's secrets. Not anymore. Not after today. Thank you for telling me, I said. You did the right thing. And I need you to know that whatever happens next, none of this is your fault. Not any of it. You understand me. She nodded against my chest. I drove her home slowly, and when we got there, Rachel was in the kitchen making dinner. She looked happy. She was wearing the dress Derek likes. I could see that now. I could see all of it now that my eyes were open. The way she checked her phone. The way she smiled at messages. The way she'd started wearing makeup even on days she stayed home. I stayed calm. I helped Sophia with her homework. I ate dinner. I tucked her into bed and read her 2 chapters from the book we were reading together. I kissed her forehead and told her I loved her more than anything in the world. Then I went downstairs. Rachel was on the couch watching Netflix, her phone in her hand. I sat down next to her, and I didn't say anything at first. I just looked at her face. This woman I'd married 15 years ago. This woman I'd built a life with. This woman who'd just given birth to the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. Rachel, I need to ask you something, and I need you to tell me the truth. She looked at me, and something in her expression changed. She knew. I don't know how she knew, but she knew that I knew. What? She said, and her voice was already defensive. Are you sleeping with Derek? She didn't answer right away. She looked away. She picked at the fabric of the couch. And then she said, yes. Just like that. Yes. Not an explanation. Not an apology. Not even a denial that she could fight against. Just a simple, brutal yes. How long? 5 months. 5 months. 5 months of lies. 5 months of her telling me she was at the gym, at the store, at book club. 5 months of her kissing me goodnight. 5 months of her lying next to me in bed and letting me believe we were okay. Does Derek know that Sophia saw you two together? Rachel's face went pale. What? Our daughter saw you and Derek at the Riverside Hotel 3 weeks ago. She watched you hold his hand. She watched him kiss your neck. She's 10 years old, Rachel, and she's been carrying this around by herself because she was too scared to tell me. Rachel stood up. Marcus, I'm not finished, I said, and my voice was calm. Ice calm. The kind of calm that comes from years of being trained to stay composed when your world is exploding. Derek humiliated me in front of Sophia 2 days ago. He told her that I wasn't good enough at my job, that I couldn't even afford to pick her up on time. And now I know why he felt so comfortable doing that. He felt like he had power over me because he'd been inside my wife. Because he was living out some fantasy where he's better than me, stronger than me, more important than me. Marcus, it's not like that. What's it like then? Explain it to me. She didn't have an answer. She just stood there, and I realized in that moment that she didn't see what she'd done. Not really. She didn't understand that she'd given Derek a weapon to use against me. She didn't understand that she'd put our daughter in the middle of her affair. She didn't understand that she'd broken something that was going to take years to fix, if it could be fixed at all. I want you to pack a bag, I said quietly. You're going to stay at your sister's house for a few days. I'm going to call my lawyer tomorrow, and we're going to start divorce proceedings. She started crying then. She reached for me. Marcus, please. I made a mistake. I was lonely. Derek paid attention to me, and, stop, I said. I don't want to hear it. Not right now. Right now, I need you away from my daughter. And I need to figure out what comes next. She left an hour later with a suitcase and red eyes. I sat in the dark living room after she was gone, and I thought about everything that had led to this moment. Derek's cruelty, Rachel's infidelity, Sophia's silent knowledge. And I thought about what I had to do next. My SEAL brothers had always told me that I was good at one thing: solving problems, eliminating threats, taking action when everyone else was frozen. It was time to use those skills for something that mattered. It was time to make sure Derek paid for what he'd done. Not with violence. I was past that now. But there were other ways. Better ways. Ways that would destroy him far more completely. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop and a cup of cold coffee, and I started documenting everything. Every text message I could remember. Every time Rachel had said she was somewhere she wasn't. Every time Derek had been cruel or dismissive to me at work. Every comment he'd made that was unprofessional or demeaning. I opened a new email account, something completely separate from my regular one, and I created a folder on my laptop where I'd save everything I was about to collect. No emotion, no rage, just facts, just evidence. That's when I realized something crucial. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger was a luxury I couldn't afford. Anger clouds judgment. Anger makes you reactive instead of strategic. And I'd spent 15 years in the Navy SEAL teams learning how to stay strategic when everything around you is burning. The next morning, Sophia asked where her mom was. I told her that mom was staying at Aunt Jennifer's house for a little while, and that sometimes grown-ups need space to figure things out. She didn't ask any more questions. She just ate her cereal and went to school. At work, I was a ghost. I went to meetings. I did my job. I was professional and courteous to everyone except Derek. With him, I was cold, distant. I didn't avoid him. That would have been suspicious, but I didn't seek him out either. And when he tried to talk to me, I kept it brief. Professional. No emotion. 2 days later, I got a call from Rachel. She was crying. She wanted to talk. She wanted to meet. We met at a coffee shop on neutral ground. Not her sister's place, not my house. Somewhere public where she couldn't create a scene. She was wearing no makeup, and her eyes were swollen from crying. She looked small, smaller than I'd ever seen her. I've been thinking about what you said, she started before I even sat down. And I want to make this right. I want to come home. I want to fix this. I ordered a coffee before I answered. I needed a moment to choose my words carefully. Rachel, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Not for me. For Sophia. She nodded, waiting. Did Derek ever say anything to you about me? About my job, my performance, my value as a person? Her face flushed. She looked away. Tell me. He said a lot of things. He said you were stagnant, that you'd never move up in the company, that you were comfortable being mediocre. He said, she stopped. He said what? He said you weren't good enough for me, that I deserved better. That he could give me the life I wanted while you were just going through the motions. There it was. That was the manipulation. That was Derek planting seeds in her mind, making her doubt me, making her feel like she was somehow settling. It was sophisticated cruelty. It was the kind of thing that works because it targets a real insecurity, The fear that maybe you're not enough. Did you believe him? I asked. At first, no. But after a while, after he kept saying it, I started to wonder if maybe he was right. Maybe I was just being practical. You were having an affair because Derek Hartwell told you that you deserved better than me? It wasn't just that. It was the attention. It was feeling wanted. It was betrayal, I said quietly. It was lying to Sophia. It was putting our 10-year-old daughter in the position of knowing something that would destroy her family, and you didn't even consider that. You didn't even think about her. Rachel started crying again. I know that now. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm filing for divorce, I said. I'm going to seek full custody of Sophia, and I'm going to make sure that Derek Hartwell never has the opportunity to manipulate anyone ever again. She reached across the table to grab my hand, but I pulled it away. Marcus, please. Please don't do this. Please don't take Sophia away from me. You made your choices, Rachel. Sophia will still see you. But visitation will be supervised until I'm confident that you're not going to let Derek or anyone else like him influence your judgment about our daughter's safety and well-being. How can you be so cold about this? Because I have to be, I said. Because the alternative is letting my anger destroy everything, and I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to let Derek win by turning me into someone who's consumed by rage. So instead, I'm going to be strategic. I'm going to be careful, and I'm going to make sure that justice actually means something. I stood up to leave. Marcus, wait. What are you going to do? I looked at her for a long moment. I'm going to do what I do best. I'm going to solve the problem. I walked out of that coffee shop, and I drove straight to a private investigator's office in downtown. I'd researched this carefully. The guy's name was Vincent Cross, and he had 20 years of experience in corporate investigations. I sat across from him in his small office and told him everything. I need documentation, I said. Hotel records, emails, text messages, any evidence of an inappropriate relationship between my boss and my wife. But I also need you to look into his professional conduct. If he's been this reckless with an affair, he's probably been reckless with other things. I need to know if he's violated company policy, if he's harassed other employees, if there's anything in his professional record that we can use. Vincent smiled, not a friendly smile, but a professional one. The smile of a man who understood exactly what I was asking for. This is going to cost you, he said. Money's not an issue. I need results. How fast? Fast. He nodded. 2 weeks. I can have preliminary findings in 2 weeks. Do it. I left his office feeling something I hadn't felt since Rachel admitted the affair. I felt like I had control. I felt like I was taking action. I felt like I was protecting my daughter by making sure that the man who'd humiliated her and betrayed our family would face real consequences. Derek Hartwell had no idea what was coming. 2 weeks later, I was sitting in Vincent's office again, and everything had changed. On the surface, nothing looked different. I still went to work. I still did my job. I still picked up Sophia from school and helped her with homework and made sure she was safe and loved. But underneath all of that, something had shifted. I'd made a decision that was going to reshape everything. Vincent slid a folder across his desk. Inside were hotel records, credit card statements, photographs, and emails. Lots of emails. Derek and Rachel had been sloppy. They'd used their work emails sometimes, believing that no one would look. They'd charged hotels to personal credit cards. They'd left digital breadcrumbs everywhere. But that wasn't the most interesting part. Your boss has a pattern, Vincent said, leaning back in his chair. The affair with your wife isn't his first. There's a woman in accounting named Melissa Chun. She filed a complaint 3 years ago about harassment. The company settled with her quietly. Before that, there was someone in HR named Jessica Morrison. She quit after Derek made unwanted advances toward her. And before that, how many? I asked. At least 6 that I can find documented evidence of. There might be more. Some of these women were too scared or too embarrassed to report it formally. I felt something cold settle in my chest. This wasn't just about my wife. This wasn't just about Derek sleeping with Rachel. This was about a pattern of behavior. This was about a man who'd learned that he could get away with it because money and position made him untouchable. And the embezzlement. Vincent smiled. Now that's interesting. Derek's been moving money. Small amounts. 50,000 here, 100,000 there. It's hidden in expense reports and vendor payments. But it's there. My accountant found it. Over 3 years, he's moved approximately $2 million into offshore accounts. $2 million. My boss had been stealing from the company while simultaneously harassing and manipulating female employees. This was beyond betrayal now. This was criminal. I can give you all of this, Vincent said. But I need to ask you something first. What are you planning to do with it? I thought about Derek's smile when he humiliated me in front of Sophia. I thought about Rachel's confession. I thought about the other women he'd hurt. I thought about all the times I could have let my anger consume me. All the moments I could have done something violent or destructive. I'm going to destroy him, I said. But not the way you might think. That night, I called my lawyer, a woman named Patricia Summers who specialized in family law, but had connections throughout the legal and business community. I told her everything. The affair, the harassment pattern, the embezzlement. I showed her Vincent's documentation. This is serious, Patricia said, her eyes moving across the pages. Really serious. If you take this to the company's legal department and the board of directors, Derek's career is over. Potentially his freedom too, depending on how the embezzlement investigation goes. I know. And you're sure about this? You understand that once you start this process, it can't be stopped. I'm sure. The next morning, I did something that felt strange. I went into work and I acted normal. I sat in meetings with Derek. I listened to him bark orders and make jokes at other people's expense. I watched him smile and felt nothing. No anger. No rage. Just the quiet certainty of someone who knows what's coming. During lunch, I met with Patricia at a restaurant near the office. We reviewed the strategy one more time. We're going to file a formal complaint with HR, she explained. We're going to present the documentation of the affair, but more importantly, we're going to present evidence of the harassment pattern. We're going to provide the company with Vincent's findings regarding the embezzlement. We're going to give them everything they need to launch an internal investigation. What about the divorce? That's separate. But the documentation of Derek's infidelity and the affair with your wife will be part of your custody case. It shows poor judgment, moral character issues, and it's relevant to establishing that Derek's been a negative influence in your family's life. And Derek? What happens to him? Patricia looked at me carefully. That depends on what the company does and what law enforcement does. But if they're smart, and they usually are when presented with this kind of evidence, they'll fire him immediately. They'll refer the embezzlement to the district attorney, and they'll likely settle with the other employees he harassed to avoid a larger lawsuit. He goes to prison? Possibly. The embezzlement alone could get him 5 to 10 years if the DA decides to prosecute aggressively. I nodded. That wasn't the goal, but it was a consequence. I'd accepted that a long time ago. That afternoon, I met with the company's HR director and general counsel. I brought Patricia with me. I brought Vincent's documentation. I brought photographs and emails and hotel records and credit card statements. I brought the names of the other women Derek had harassed. And I told them everything. The HR director's face went from red to white to pale gray as she read through the files. The general counsel didn't say much, but I could see him calculating the legal liability, the potential lawsuits, the damage control. Why are you coming to us with this? The general counsel asked. Why not just go to the police? Because I want to do this the right way, I said. I want the company to take responsibility for not protecting its employees. I want the women he harassed to have a path to justice that doesn't require them to relive their trauma in a criminal courtroom. And I want Derek's actions to have consequences that actually matter. And in exchange, I'm giving you the opportunity to handle this internally before law enforcement gets involved. That's a courtesy I could have decided not to extend. The HR director and the general counsel exchanged a look. I could see them understanding that I had all the power in this situation, that I'd come to them with enough evidence to destroy the company's reputation if they didn't act. We'll need to conduct an investigation, the general counsel said finally. You have everything you need to conduct that investigation. I'm giving you 2 weeks to figure out what you're going to do. After that, if Derek hasn't been fired and if the company hasn't initiated a formal investigation into the embezzlement, we're going to the police and to the media. I stood up. Patricia gathered the files. We walked out of that office, and I felt something inside me settle into place. I'd done it. I'd set the wheels in motion. There was no going back now. That night, Sophia asked me if Mommy was coming home soon. Not for a while, sweetie, I told her. But I want you to know that everything that's happening is because I love you, and because I'm going to make sure that you're safe, and that people who hurt you face consequences for their actions. She didn't understand yet. She would, eventually. But for now, she just hugged me and asked if we could order pizza for dinner. We ordered pizza, and we watched a movie, and I held my daughter close and knew that whatever came next, I'd done everything right. Not the angry way, not the violent way, but the right way. 14 days. That's how long the company took to respond. 14 days of Derek walking around the office like nothing was happening. 14 days of him making comments in meetings, sending emails, acting like he was untouchable. I watched him, and I didn't feel angry anymore. I felt pity. He was a man living on borrowed time, and he didn't even know it. On day 15, everything exploded. The general counsel called an emergency meeting with Derek. I wasn't in the room, but I heard about it later. They'd fired him on the spot. They'd told him that they'd discovered evidence of embezzlement and harassment, and they were referring everything to law enforcement and to the company's board of directors. They'd escorted him out of the building with a box of his personal items while security watched. Derek tried to fight it. He got a lawyer of his own. He claimed the affair was consensual and that the embezzlement allegations were baseless. But the documentation was airtight. Vincent had done his job perfectly. More importantly, the women came forward. Once Derek was gone, once it became clear that the company was actually going to hold him accountable, the other employees who'd been harassed started talking. Melissa Chun from accounting gave a formal statement. Jessica Morrison from HR came back in to give a deposition. A woman named Tara Williams who worked in marketing described how Derek had trapped her in a supply closet and tried to kiss her 3 years ago. She'd been too scared to report it then. Now she was ready. The company's legal team reached out to Patricia about settlements. They offered money to the women Derek had harassed. They offered money to Rachel and me as well, which we refused. This wasn't about money for us. This was about justice. But there was something else happening that I hadn't anticipated. One afternoon, I got a call from a detective named James Morrison with the district attorney's office. He wanted to meet with me about Derek Hartwell. I met him at a coffee shop, and he laid out what they'd found. The embezzlement is serious, he said, stirring his coffee. $2 million over 3 years. We've traced it to offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. We're working with federal authorities to get those records. But here's what's interesting. We found other things. Derek's been using company funds for personal expenses. He's been forging invoices. He's been bending rules in ways that suggest this wasn't impulsive. This was calculated and ongoing. So he's definitely going to face charges? We're building a case now. We'll need you to potentially testify about the harassment and the affair just to establish motive and character. But based on what we have so far, yes. We're confident we can file charges for embezzlement, wire fraud, and potentially securities fraud, depending on what else we find. I nodded. This was the part I'd been waiting for. This was the part where Derek's actions actually had legal consequences. There's something else, Detective Morrison said. We found evidence that Derek had been planning to leave the country. We found plane tickets booked under a false name, a new passport application in process. If you hadn't come forward when you did, if you hadn't given us that documentation when you did, he would have disappeared. He would have fled to the Cayman Islands with $2 million of the company's money, and we probably never would have caught him. I thought about that. I thought about Derek running. Derek starting a new life somewhere else with money he'd stolen. Derek escaping all consequences. You stopped that from happening, Detective Morrison said. You and your investigator gave us enough to move fast enough to catch him before he could disappear. The next week, Patricia and I had a meeting about the custody case. Rachel's lawyer had been in touch. Rachel wanted to negotiate. She's offering to agree to your custody terms, Patricia told me. Full custody for you. She's asking for supervised visitation, which is what you wanted anyway, and she's willing to pay child support despite her limited income right now. She's also agreed to go through counseling and anger management before she can request unsupervised visitation. How long? I asked. She's suggesting 2 years of supervised visitation, then a review of the arrangement based on her progress in therapy and her demonstrated judgment. 2 years seemed reasonable. 2 years would give Sophia time to process what had happened. 2 years would give Rachel time to understand the damage she'd caused. And 2 years would give me time to make sure my daughter understood that her mother's choices were not her father's fault. I agreed to the terms. The divorce was finalized 3 weeks later. It was quick because Rachel had stopped fighting. She'd realized that she'd lost, and she was trying to minimize the damage. I didn't feel victorious. I just felt tired. But there was one more thing I had to do. I went to see Derek's lawyer, a man named Robert Kane who'd been trying to mount a defense that was crumbling by the day. I met with him in his office, and I made an offer. Derek can plead guilty, I said. He can take responsibility for his actions. He can cooperate with law enforcement. In exchange, I won't pursue additional civil litigation. I won't go to the media. I'll keep the story quiet. Robert looked at me like I was insane. Why would you do that? Because I'm not interested in destroying him further. I'm interested in making sure he faces consequences and making sure he understands what he did. A public trial where he has to listen to his victims describe his abuse. That's going to be worse than any prison sentence. So he has a choice. He can fight this and have his crimes detailed in court with reporters taking notes. Or he can plead guilty and do his time quietly. I'll tell him, Robert said. Derek took the deal. He pled guilty to embezzlement, wire fraud, and securities fraud. He was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison. He's serving his time now in a minimum security facility upstate, and I honestly haven't thought about him much since then. What I think about is Sophia. What I think about is rebuilding her trust. What I think about is making sure she knows that some people will try to hurt you, but there are people who will fight for you without losing themselves to anger in the process. The investigation into Derek didn't stop with his guilty plea. If anything, it accelerated. Once the district attorney started pulling on the threads, everything unraveled. The company's own internal investigation revealed that Derek hadn't just stolen from the company. He'd been systematically covering his tracks by falsifying reports and pressuring subordinates to sign off on fraudulent expenses. 3 middle managers came forward saying Derek had threatened their jobs if they questioned his spending. One of them, a guy named Thomas Bradley who worked in accounting, had actually tried to report the discrepancies 2 years ago. Derek had gotten him transferred to a different department and made his life miserable until Thomas eventually quit. The company's board of directors realized they had a massive liability problem. If they'd known about Derek's misconduct and done nothing, they could face shareholder lawsuits. If they could show they'd acted quickly and decisively once they learned the truth, they might be able to limit the damage. So they cooperated fully with the investigation. They handed over all communications. They provided all documentation. They made it clear that they were taking responsibility for their failures and oversight. But that cooperation came with a price. The company issued a public statement saying that Derek Hartwell had been terminated for cause due to evidence of embezzlement, harassment, and misconduct. They announced that they were conducting a full internal audit of all his financial transactions. They committed to providing settlements to all employees who'd experienced harassment or misconduct. The press picked it up immediately. Local news stations started running stories. Local executive accused of sexual harassment and embezzlement. The business journals dug deeper. They found information about the offshore accounts. They found the pattern of harassment going back years. They found evidence that the company had known about some of the harassment and had quietly paid off victims without addressing the underlying problem. Derek's name was everywhere. Everywhere in a way that destroyed him. I wasn't mentioned in most of the stories. Patricia had made sure of that. She'd kept my name out of the public record as much as possible. I was just a former employee or an anonymous witness. But in the business community, people knew. People whispered about the Navy guy who'd worked in IT and who'd somehow brought down the executive vice president. Some people respected me for it. Some people were afraid of me. And some people, I'm sure, thought I was just settling a personal score. I didn't care what they thought. What I cared about was that Derek was gone. What I cared about was that the other women he'd harassed were getting justice and compensation. What I cared about was that Sophia was safe. But something unexpected happened about 6 months after Derek's guilty plea. A woman named Elena Rodriguez came to Patricia's office. Elena had worked in Derek's department, and she'd witnessed his harassment of other employees. She'd also witnessed something else, something that neither Vincent nor the investigators had found. Derek had been stealing from individual employees' expense accounts. Not just company money. Personal reimbursements for work-related travel and meals. He was small-time skimming from dozens of people, amounts that ranged from $50 to a few $100s. Most people probably didn't even notice it. But when you added it all up, it came to another $300,000 over 2 years. Elena had documentation. She had spreadsheets. She had evidence. Why didn't you come forward earlier? Patricia asked her. Because I was scared, Elena said. Derek made it clear that if anyone talked about his behavior, they'd be fired. He said he had connections. He said he could ruin people's careers. I just kept my head down and tried to survive. Patricia filed additional charges against Derek based on Elena's evidence. The federal prosecutors added more fraud counts to his case. Derek's sentence ended up being extended by another 3 years. 11 years total. The company also discovered that Derek had been using his position to negotiate kickbacks from vendors. He'd been steering business to companies that paid him personal commissions. That led to an SEC investigation. That led to more charges against other company executives who'd known about it and said nothing. By the time everything was done, Derek's actions had triggered investigations that went far beyond him. The company had to restructure its entire oversight system. They had to implement new compliance programs. They had to fire several executives who'd enabled Derek's behavior. The stock price dropped 15%. There were shareholder lawsuits. There were federal audits. All because Derek had decided to humiliate me in front of my daughter. All because Derek had decided that he could take whatever he wanted, money, women, respect, without facing consequences. I watched it all happen from a distance. I didn't feel satisfied. I didn't feel vindicated. I just felt like justice was actually working the way it's supposed to work. Derek's actions had consequences. Real, lasting consequences. 3 months into Derek's prison sentence, I got an unexpected visitor. Thomas Bradley, the accountant who Derek had pushed out of the company, came to see me. He'd started a new job at a different firm, and he wanted to thank me. I knew something was wrong, Thomas said, sitting in my living room. I tried to report it, and Derek destroyed me for it. I was angry. I was hurt. I thought maybe it was my fault, that maybe I'd misunderstood something. But then when your investigation came out, when everything was exposed, I realized I wasn't crazy. I wasn't wrong. Derek really had been stealing, and I was right to try to report it. I'm sorry he treated you that way, I said. I'm sorry it took someone like you, someone with the resources and knowledge to fight back, to actually stop him, Thomas said. Imagine how many women would still be getting harassed if you hadn't had the money for a private investigator. Imagine how much more Derek would have stolen if he hadn't gotten caught. For most people, there's no justice. There's just survival. After Thomas left, I thought about what he'd said. He was right. I'd had advantages that other people didn't have. I'd had training and discipline and financial resources and the confidence that comes from a military background. I'd had access to a good lawyer and a skilled investigator. A lot of people in situations similar to mine never get justice because they can't afford to fight back. But Sophia had gotten justice. She'd gotten a father who fought for her using every tool at his disposal. And that was something. That was everything. 9 months into Derek's prison sentence, something happened that I didn't see coming. I was at home with Sophia, helping her with her homework, when Patricia called. Her voice was different, urgent in a way I hadn't heard before. "We need to meet," she said. "Tonight. Bring any documentation you have about Derek's accounts and the offshore transfers." "What happened?" I asked. "Just meet me. 1 hour. My office." I got a sitter for Sophia and drove to Patricia's office in downtown. She was waiting for me with a federal prosecutor named Susan Chun and Detective Morrison. "We found something," Susan said, spreading documents across Patricia's conference table. "Something that wasn't in the original investigation because we didn't know where to look. Derek's embezzlement wasn't random. It was intentional. It was targeted." "Targeted at what?" I asked. "At the company's CEO and board members," Detective Morrison said. "Derek was blackmailing them." I felt my stomach drop. Susan explained. Derek had discovered that the CEO, a man named Richard Stratton, had been using company money to fund a second family in another state. Derek found the documentation, the house purchases, the monthly payments, the forged business expenses to cover it all. Instead of reporting it, Derek used it as leverage. He'd been extorting money from Stratton for 5 years. Stratton would approve Derek's fraudulent expenses in exchange for Derek keeping quiet about his own affair and his embezzlement. "But there's more," Detective Morrison continued. "We found evidence that Derek wasn't just blackmailing the CEO. He discovered similar vulnerabilities with 3 board members. One of them had been embezzling himself. Another had been involved in a cover-up of a workplace safety violation that had resulted in an employee's death. A third had been using company resources to fund a gambling addiction. Derek had dirt on all of them," I said, understanding now. "Exactly," Susan said. "Derek's embezzlement was partially self-dealing, but it was also payment for his silence. The CEO was paying him to keep quiet about the second family. The board members were allowing his financial fraud to continue because Derek had leverage over them." "This is much bigger than we thought," Detective Morrison said. "This isn't just about Derek stealing money. This is about systemic corruption at the highest levels of the company. Derek was operating as a blackmailer, extortionist, and embezzler all at once." I leaned back in my chair. The web was deeper and more complex than I'd realized. "What does this mean?" I asked. "It means new charges," Susan said, "against Derek for extortion and blackmail. It means investigations into the CEO and the board members. It means the company is going to face far more serious consequences than we initially thought. It means people are going to prison." "Including the CEO?" I asked. "Potentially. Depends on what evidence we can gather and how cooperative he decides to be." The next 72 hours were chaos. The federal prosecutors moved fast. They subpoenaed records from the CEO's personal bank accounts. They interviewed the board members. They started building cases for extortion, bribery, embezzlement, and conspiracy. The CEO, Richard Stratton, immediately lawyered up, but he also started cooperating. He gave a statement to prosecutors in exchange for immunity on the blackmail aspect of the scheme. He admitted to the second family, admitted to the embezzlement, admitted to paying Derek to keep quiet. The board members tried to fight, but one of them, the one who'd covered up the workplace safety violation, realized he was facing potential criminal charges for negligent homicide. He cooperated in exchange for a plea deal on the embezzlement charges. Within a week, federal indictments came down against 5 people: Derek, the CEO, and 3 board members. The company announced that the CEO was stepping down immediately pending the outcome of the federal investigation. They announced that the 3 board members were resigning. They announced that they were conducting a complete restructuring of their governance and compliance systems. The stock price plummeted. Shareholders sued. Major clients started looking for alternative vendors. The company that had seemed so stable, so powerful, so untouchable 6 months earlier was now in freefall. And Derek, sitting in his federal prison cell, had become even more valuable to prosecutors. He was now the key witness in cases against the CEO and board members. The federal prosecutors were offering him a deal, testimony in exchange for a sentence reduction. I found out about this through Patricia, who'd stayed in touch with Susan throughout the investigation. He's going to testify? I asked. Yes. Derek's smart enough to understand that his best chance of reducing his sentence is to cooperate fully with the government. He's going to testify against all 5 defendants, the CEO, the board members, and potentially even against himself to establish the pattern of corruption. How much time will he get knocked off his sentence? Probably 5 to 7 years if the testimony is substantial and credible, Patricia said. So instead of 11 years, he's looking at 4 to 6. I felt something shift inside me. This wasn't justice in the way I'd imagined it. This was Derek becoming a cooperating witness. This was Derek potentially getting a reduced sentence because he'd decided to turn on the people who'd been paying him for his silence. But it was also Derek admitting his guilt in open court. It was Derek describing his own crimes, his own cruelty, his own willingness to profit from blackmail and extortion. It was Derek being exposed completely. The trials didn't start until a year later. By that time, so much had changed. I was working at a new company. I'd been promoted to director of IT security, a position I'd gotten partly because of my reputation in the business community as someone who actually had the courage to fight corruption. People respected that, or they feared me. Either way, the result was the same. Sophia was in 6th grade. She was doing better. She was in therapy, talking to a counselor about what had happened with her parents. The counselor said she was processing things in a healthy way, that she understood her parents' actions weren't her fault. Rachel was living in a small apartment and working as a paralegal. She'd been clean, no contact with Derek, no inappropriate relationships, no drama. She was paying child support. She was seeing Sophia during supervised visitation and slowly rebuilding a relationship with our daughter based on honesty and accountability. When the trials finally happened, I didn't attend. I didn't need to. I'd already won what mattered. Derek testified for 3 days. He described his embezzlement in detail. He described his blackmail scheme. He described the payments he'd received from the CEO and board members. He described his affair with Rachel and his harassment of female employees. By the time he was done, he was a completely broken man, exposed, ashamed, and facing years in prison. The CEO was convicted of embezzlement, conspiracy, and bribery. He was sentenced to 6 years. 2 of the board members pled guilty and received sentences ranging from 3 to 5 years. The 3rd board member, the one who'd covered up the workplace safety violation, was convicted of obstruction of justice and received a sentence of 4 years. Derek was sentenced to an additional 5 years on top of his original 8-year sentence. But because of his cooperation, his sentence was reduced to 7 years total. He'll be out in about 5, assuming good behavior. Justice doesn't always look like you think it will. Sometimes it's messy, eh? Sometimes the guilty parties get reduced sentences because they cooperate with authorities. Sometimes the powerful people go to prison alongside the less powerful people. But it's still justice. It's still accountability. And that's what mattered. With Derek gone and the trials finished, something shifted in our house. It wasn't immediate. It wasn't like flipping a switch. But slowly, over months, our home became a place of actual healing instead of just survival. Sophia was 12 now. She was still processing everything that had happened, but her therapist, Dr. Michelle Hayes, said she was doing remarkably well for a kid who'd gone through what she'd gone through. Kids are resilient, Dr. Hayes told me during one of our family sessions. But Sophia's resilience comes from something specific. She has a father who fought for her without losing himself to anger or bitterness. That teaches her something powerful about how to handle betrayal and pain. I didn't feel like I'd done anything special. I'd just done what needed to be done. But I was starting to understand that maybe that was the point. Maybe just doing the right thing, consistently and calmly, was its own kind of strength. Sophia and I started having regular conversations about what had happened. Not heavy, overwhelming talks where I forced her to process trauma. Just honest conversations where she could ask questions and I could give her real answers. Dad, why did Mom cheat on you? She asked one afternoon while we were making pizza for dinner. Because she made a bad choice, I said. She was unhappy with herself, and instead of working on that, she looked for someone else to make her feel better. Derek told her things she wanted to hear. He made her feel special and wanted. And for a while, that was enough to make her ignore the hurt she was causing me and you. Do you hate her? No, baby. I don't hate her. I was angry for a long time. But hate, that's a poison that only hurts the person who's feeling it. So I let go of the hate a long time ago. But you're not together anymore. No, because trust is broken now. And even though I forgive her, I can't forget. I can't unknow what she did. And that's okay. That's the consequence of her choices. Sophia was quiet for a moment, spreading sauce on the pizza dough. I'm glad you didn't hate her, she said finally. I'm glad you did the right thing even when you were mad. That moment, that simple statement from my daughter, meant more to me than all the legal victories combined. I also started working with Sophia on understanding her own power and agency. I wanted her to know that what had happened to our family wasn't her fault, but more than that, I wanted her to know that she had the ability to protect herself and stand up for herself. I enrolled her in martial arts classes, not because I wanted her to be a fighter, but because I wanted her to understand her own physical and mental strength. She took to it naturally. She was focused and disciplined and brave. When she earned her yellow belt, I was sitting in the audience with tears in my eyes. I did it, Dad, she said, running up to me after the ceremony. You did it, I agreed, pulling her close. And you know what? That's what you do when something is hard. You don't give up. You don't let fear stop you. You keep going until you accomplish what you set out to do. She looked up at me with understanding in her eyes. I think she knew I wasn't just talking about martial arts. Rachel started asking for unsupervised visitation after about 18 months of supervised visits. Her therapist, her lawyer, and I all agreed it was time. The supervised visitation had served its purpose. Rachel had proven that she was serious about changing. She was in therapy. She was building a stable life. She was showing genuine remorse for what she'd done. I want you to know something. Rachel told me when we met to discuss the transition to unsupervised visitation. I've spent a lot of time understanding why I made the choices I did, and I've come to realize that I was running from myself. I was running from my own insecurity and my own failures, and I tried to fill that void with Derek's attention. It was wrong. It was selfish, and I hurt the two people I love most in the world. I know, I said. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I know that's something I have to earn over time, but I'm asking for the chance to be a better mother going forward. To be honest with Sophia about my mistakes so she can learn from them instead of repeating them. I think that's a good plan, I said. Sophia's relationship with her mother started to rebuild. Slowly, carefully, but genuinely. Rachel wasn't trying to be perfect or pretend that nothing had happened. She was just being honest and present and doing the work of being a good parent. One evening, about 2 years after everything had fallen apart, Sophia and I were sitting on the back porch watching the sunset. She was 14 now, turning into a young woman, but she was still my little girl in so many ways. Dad, do you ever think about Mr. Derek? She asked. Sometimes, I said honestly. Not in an angry way anymore. Just, I think about what he did, and I'm glad that he's in prison. I'm glad that he can't hurt anyone else. Do you think he's sorry? I think he's sorry he got caught. I don't know if he's truly sorry for what he did. Some people never get there. But that's not my problem to solve anymore. I'm glad you fought for me, Sophia said. I'm glad you didn't just let it go. I'm glad you did the right thing even when it was hard. I pulled her close, and we sat there watching the sun go down over the neighborhood. The light was turning everything golden and soft. There was a peace in that moment that I hadn't felt in a long time. I'll always fight for you, I told her. Always. 3 years after Derek went to prison, Rachel called me. Her voice was different, shaky, uncertain. Can we meet? She asked. Not with lawyers. Not in a formal setting. Just, can we talk? I agreed to meet her at a coffee shop on a Saturday afternoon. Sophia was at a friend's house, and I had time. I wasn't sure what Rachel wanted, but I was curious enough to find out. She looked different, older, like someone who'd been through something that had aged her beyond her years. She ordered a coffee, and we sat at a small table in the corner. I've been thinking about what to say for weeks, Rachel began, and I still don't have the right words. But I need to try. Okay, I said. I've been in therapy for 3 years now, and my therapist helped me understand the depth of what I did. Not just the affair, that was bad enough, but the way I treated you, the way I lied to you, the way I put Sophia in the middle of my own selfishness. I've been carrying so much shame about it, Marcus. So much guilt. I didn't say anything. I just listened. Derek reached out to me. She continued. About 6 months ago. He's in a minimum security prison, and he has limited contact with the outside world. He wrote me a letter asking if I'd visit him. He said he wanted to apologize. He said he wanted to make things right. Did you go? I asked. No. I threw the letter away. And then I called my therapist, and we talked about why he'd written to me and what that meant. And I realized something. Derek was trying to manipulate me again. He was trying to make himself feel better by getting my forgiveness. He wasn't actually interested in my healing or in making things right. He was just interested in easing his own conscience. Rachel took a sip of her coffee. I'm telling you this because I want you to know that I'm not going back to him. I'm not going to let him back into my life in any way. But more than that, I wanted to apologize to you. Genuinely. For everything. I appreciate that, I said. Do you? Because I've spent years wondering if you'd ever actually forgive me. And I realized that maybe forgiveness isn't something you owe me. Maybe all I can do is live my life differently and hope that eventually you can see that I'm not the person I was. I've already forgiven you, Rachel, I said. And I realized as I said it that it was true. I had forgiven her. Not because she deserved it, but because holding on to anger wasn't helping me or Sophia anymore. I forgave you a long time ago. That doesn't mean I trust you the way I used to. That doesn't mean we're going to get back together. But I don't hate you, and I don't wish bad things for you. I just want you to be a good mother to Sophia and to live a good life. Rachel's eyes filled with tears. Thank you. That's more than I deserve. It's not about what you deserve, I said. It's about me deciding that I'm not going to let what you did destroy me. And I'm not. So we're good. You and me, we're okay. Over the next year, Rachel continued to rebuild her relationship with Sophia. It wasn't perfect. There were moments when Sophia would pull away, moments when the hurt would surface. But they were working through it honestly, without pretense. Sophia asked Rachel directly about the affair one afternoon during one of their visits. Why did you do it? Sophia asked. Why did you cheat on Dad? Rachel didn't make excuses. She told Sophia the truth, that she'd been unhappy with herself, that she'd made a selfish choice, that she'd hurt the people she loved most in the world because she wasn't strong enough to face her own problems. I'm sorry, Rachel said. I'm sorry that I put you in a position where you knew about my affair and had to carry that secret. I'm sorry that I hurt your dad. And I'm sorry that I taught you a lesson about betrayal through my own actions instead of through words. Are you different now? Sophia asked. I'm trying to be, Rachel said. Every day, I'm trying to be a better person than I was. And I'm going to keep trying for the rest of my life. That answer seemed to satisfy Sophia. Not because it was perfect, but because it was honest. Around the same time, I got a surprising call from Thomas Bradley, the accountant who Derek had pushed out of the company years ago. I wanted to let you know something, Thomas said. I've started a consulting firm. We help companies identify financial fraud and corruption. And I want to hire you as our director of security and compliance. You've got the experience, the reputation, and most importantly, you've got the integrity that this work requires. I took the job. It felt right. It felt like taking all the pain and chaos from the last few years and turning it into something that could help other people. I spent my time helping companies identify corruption, training their staff, implementing systems to prevent embezzlement and fraud. One of our first clients was a tech startup where a senior executive had been embezzling. We caught it early. We helped implement systems to prevent it from happening again. And we worked with the company to create a culture where employees felt empowered to report suspicious behavior without fear of retaliation. That's when I realized something profound. Derek's crimes, Derek's cruelty, Derek's manipulation, all of it had led me to work that actually mattered. Work that was helping other companies and other families avoid what we'd gone through. Justice isn't always about punishment. Sometimes it's about transformation. 5 years after Derek went to prison, I was standing on a beach at sunset with my daughter. She was 17 now, almost a woman, almost ready to face the world on her own terms. We didn't talk much. We just stood there watching the waves roll in, watching the light turn everything gold and crimson. The ocean has a way of putting things in perspective, making your problems feel smaller, making you realize that life is bigger than any single moment of pain or betrayal. "Dad, can I ask you something?" Sophia said. "Always. Do you ever regret how you handled everything with Derek and Mom? Do you ever wish you'd done things differently?" I thought about that carefully. I thought about the moment I found out about the affair. I thought about the rage I could have let consume me. I thought about the violence I could have chosen. I thought about the path I actually took, the strategic one, the disciplined one, the one that required staying calm when everything inside me wanted to explode. "No," I said finally. "I don't regret it. Because the way I handled it taught you something that no amount of words ever could have. It taught you that strength isn't about how loud you can yell or how hard you can hit. It's about staying clear-headed when your world is falling apart. It's about doing the right thing even when doing the wrong thing would feel so much better in the moment." "I'm proud of you," Sophia said. "I know I don't say it enough, but I am." Those 6 words, "I'm proud of you," they meant more to me than any victory or legal outcome ever could. That was the real win. That was the proof that I'd done something right. We walked along the beach for a while, and then Sophia asked me something that made me stop in my tracks. "Do you think you'll ever get married again?" I hadn't thought about that much. I'd been so focused on being a good father, on building a stable life for Sophia, on my work with Thomas's consulting firm. Romance felt like something that belonged to a different version of my life. "Maybe," I said, "if I meet someone who understands who I am and what I've been through. But I'm not looking for it. It'll happen if it's meant to happen." "Good," Sophia said. "Because I want you to be happy, Dad. Not just okay. Actually happy." "I am happy," I said, and I realized it was true. I was happy. Not in the way I'd been before everything fell apart. That was a different kind of happiness, built on illusions. This happiness was deeper. It was earned. It was built on solid ground. We drove home as the last light faded from the sky. Sophia was quiet, looking out the window, lost in her own thoughts. I knew she was processing a lot. She was at that age where childhood was ending and adulthood was starting. She was figuring out who she wanted to be and what kind of person she wanted to become. At one point, she turned to me and said, "I'm going to be a lawyer." Yeah. I want to help people who've been hurt by people like Derek. I want to make sure that people who do bad things actually face consequences. I want to be the kind of person who fights for justice the way you did." I felt something break open in my chest, the good kind of breaking, the kind that lets light in. "That's a beautiful dream," I said. "It's not just a dream," Sophia said. "It's what I'm going to do." To my viewers,